Over a year ago, when me and my fiance had just started dating, we went on this cute, fun, romantic little date to a fair. At least it would have been cute, fun, and romantic if I wasn't terrified out of my mind of rides, like amusement park rides, roller coasters, it doesn't matter what kind, I just don't like rides. I like my feet to stay on the ground, okay? I get easily sick on them. It's a whole thing. I don't like to do them. But anyway, we go to this fair, and there's this one ride, you've probably seen it before. It's like this circle tower, and there's these swings that go around in a circle. It's not the carousel. I was telling this story to someone else. They're like, you're scared of the carousel? No, we also did the carousel. A little creepy, but not like this one, okay? So basically you sit down on this swing and then it starts to throw you around in a circle as it raises you up into heaven, okay? And it just goes like this and it throws you around like 26 times, right? And Divinity's like, I want to do that ride. My fiance or girlfriend at the time was like, I want to do that ride. And I'm thinking in my head, I want to do nothing less than that ride. Like I want to do anything else except for that ride. But we had like just started dating, like weeks before. So I still wanted to impress her. I still wanted to act tough and be cool. So I was like, okay, right? And so we walk over and we wait in line and I'm freaking out, right? Like my heart is pounding out of my chest. And I'm like, I do not want to do this. And so I'm like, Divinity, you know what? I can't do this. And I start to walk away because I'm scared. I'm like, I will watch you. I'll hold your stuff. Okay, but you can go do it. I don't want to do it. And as I'm starting to walk away, she grabs my arm and I turn around. I'm like, what? And she says, hey, I'm right here with you. She was like, I'm right here with you. And I was like, my heart rate lowered. And I said, okay, you know what? If she's with me, baby, I can do this because I'm not doing it alone. You know, there's a lot of power to someone doing something with you. I think sometimes when someone is with you, you have this ability to do things that you would otherwise not be able to do if you were alone. You know what I'm saying? Like, have you ever done something with someone else that you would have never done alone? Maybe it's just like go and do something weird. Maybe it's go do something crazy. Maybe it's go do something impressive. I don't know, but there's this certain thing about having someone with you. And I want to read from this passage. It's from the calling of Moses. I was asked to speak a few weeks ago to a bunch of up-and-coming ministers who are currently in college. I'm actually in that category myself, but I was asked to speak at this little event, this little gathering. And I wanted to highlight one question that Moses asked. So let me give some context. In the calling of Moses, you have this generations of oppression by slavery. The Israelites are slaves in Egypt. And they're calling out to God, crying out to God, why have you forgotten us? God, why don't you do something about this? And little did they know, as they were crying out, God had a plan. And he was doing some really cool things in the background, but that's a topic for another video. But then God says, okay, you know what? I'm going to raise up someone that can lead my people into freedom. And he chooses this man named Moses. So Moses one day is walking through the wilderness. He sees this burning bush. Moses in the burning bush. You might have heard this story in Sunday school. Moses goes and he checks it out. And God starts talking to him. And let me go and pick it up in Exodus chapter 3, starting in verse 9. Now the cry of the Israelites has reached me. This is God speaking to Moses. And I've seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go, I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, hold on a second. Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? Here's my favorite part. Look at God's response. And God said, I will be with you. And God said, I will be with you. You know, I think that there's a lot of power in that response. Moses, he ends up having all these questions that he gives to God, but I love that first one. Moses says, hold on a second, God, who am I that I could do this? And God says, Moses, look, I will be with you. You know, I think for those who are called into ministry, but also for those who aren't, there's a really valuable lesson in here. For those who are called into ministry, God might call you to do something that you feel like you are not equipped or qualified for. For those who aren't called into ministry, which is probably majority of my audience, I think it's interesting because there's some things that can seem really intimidating in the Bible. Like some of the stuff that the Bible calls us to do as just followers of Christ, not even ministers of the gospel, but to be a disciple and to be a follower. The truth is, like, to do that, you cannot do it alone. Like, no exceptions. There's no way that you can be like good enough for God alone or qualify for God's love by doing it on your own power. It just doesn't work. Transformation does not happen for a Christian without the Holy Spirit in their lives, without leaning on God, without surrendering to God and allowing God to move in you. It's kind of this divine dance between both parties. There's a lot of God's movement and there's a lot of our surrender. And together that creates transformation. Together that grants us the ability to do these things that God calls us to do. And I think as Christians, if we ever try to do it alone, it's going to be a task that's just too big for us to handle. Well, I have good news. We're not alone. But Jared, I know that God said that he was with Moses, and Moses is like this crazy historical figure that did all these amazing things, and God was obviously with him. He parted the waters, he struck a rock and water came out, manna came from the sky. Like, God was obviously with him, but you know, God doesn't move the way that he used to. Does he? Well, you know, Jesus came down to earth. Jared, that was like thousands of years ago. Hold on. And some of Jesus' last words, when he was, when all of his disciples were gathered around him, some of Jesus' last words to his disciples were this. He gives them a command, and he says, "Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you." And he gives them this command to go and do this, which is a tall task and a task that we are to carry on. But there's a second part. And then Jesus promises, "And surely I will be with you always to the very end of the age." God makes that promise. Jesus makes that promise to his disciples as some of his last words while he was on earth. And I know it's not just a promise for the disciples that were standing there, because he says, "Surely I will be with you," what? Always. Where? To the very end, right? Like there is no limit on God being with us, because Jesus came and died and resurrected and ascended. Now the Holy Spirit lives. God lives in us through the Holy Spirit, which means that we are not alone. Which means that anything that God calls us to do is not a call for us to do alone, ever. Why? Because God promises to be with us. Sometimes you might face something that's like, this is just too big for me to handle. Yeah. You know, a lot of my Christian walk has actually been me learning to just surrender to God and saying, "Lord, I'm just going to stop making plans because they don't seem to work out. Lord, let your will be done." Saying, "God, I'm not good enough to do this, but if you want to do it, you can use me as a vessel for it." Sometimes we just have to get out of God's way and let him move how he wants to move. Remembering all the while that in this awesome calling that he gives every single one of us, not just to those who are called to ministry, but to every single one of us, that calling that we have as a Christian, a follower, a disciple of Jesus. We are never alone. Lean on Jesus. Lean on Jesus today, because he is with you. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all I got. Peace.